Okay, Virgo, let's navigate this. Uh, there is a current that runs beneath the visible surface of financial reality that most people spend their entire lives above. They interact with money at the surface level, earning it through the declared mechanisms, spending it through the visible channels, accumulating or losing it in ways that correspond to the legible logic of effort and compensation and the ordinary mathematics of a life lived inside the systems designed to produce those outcomes. And for most people, most of the time, this is sufficient. The surface current carries them. It is not glamorous and it is not abundant and it does not produce the kind of material shift that changes not just what you have, but how you understand what is available to you. But it is reliable in its own way, predictable, navigable by the rules that everyone around you is also navigating by. But there is another current, deeper, faster, running in directions that the surface logic does not account for and cannot predict. It carries different things, not the incremental, proportional results of declared effort, but the sudden, apparently disproportionate, arrived from an unexpected direction results of alignment, of being at a specific moment in the specific position where the deeper current runs for reasons that may have very little to do with what you were consciously doing in the period immediately preceding the arrival. The lump sum is not a surface current event, it is a deep current delivery. And the deep current does not announce its schedule, it simply arrives. Unexpected. The word is doing something specific in this reading, and it is worth staying with rather than moving past. Unexpected does not mean undeserved. These are different things, and the conflation of them, the assumption that what arrives without being specifically engineered for is therefore somehow less legitimately yours, is one of the more insidious forms of self diminishment available to people who have been taught to associate worth with effort in a very particular, very narrow, very visible, work for visible return kind of way. Unexpected means the channel was not the one you were watching. The delivery came through a door you did not know, was a door through a connection you made years ago that you had stopped thinking about, through a decision that seemed minor at the time and has been compounding quietly ever since, through the specific, unrepeatable combination of something you did and someone you are, and a moment in time when those two things intersected with a third variable you did not control. Unexpected means the map you were using did not show this route. It does not mean the route was not there. The route was there. You were on it without knowing you were on it, which is how the most significant routes tend to be traveled, not with the full awareness of a person who chose this direction deliberately and is monitoring their progress, but with the partial awareness of someone who kept moving in a generally right direction, kept making choices that were aligned with something, even when the something was not fully visible, kept showing up for the work even when the work was not producing the kind of feedback that confirms you are on the right track. The track was right, the feedback was delayed. The lump sum is the delayed feedback arriving all at once, compressed into a single event rather than distributed across the time it was accumulating in. What prepares a life to receive a lump sum not what earns it, what prepares the receiving. Because the receiving is its own thing, separate from whatever produced the sum, and it has its own requirements that are worth understanding before the delivery rather than after. A person unprepared to receive a significant amount of money tends to move it through their hands faster than it arrived, not from stupidity or irresponsibility, but from the specific structural discomfort of holding more than the container was sized for. The container is the self concept, the understanding of yourself as someone whose life contains a certain volume of financial reality. And when what arrives exceeds that volume, the excess creates a pressure that the container tries to relieve through whatever mechanisms are available, spending, giving away, minimizing, finding reasons the sum is not really what it appears to be, translating it as quickly as possible into the smaller, more familiar denominations that fit comfortably inside the existing self concept. The preparation for receiving is the expansion of the container before the delivery, which means not the acquisition of financial sophistication, though that is useful, not the development of an investment strategy, though that too has its place, but the interior work of making space, of expanding the self concept to include a version of your life that contains more than what has previously been available, of spending time, genuine, deliberate, not dismissing it as fantasy time, in the understanding of yourself as someone whose financial reality is about to change, of allowing the change to feel possible before it arrives, of not preemptively minimizing what is forming before it has had the chance to fully form. This is the preparation. It is invisible from the outside. It produces no artifact that can be pointed to as evidence of productive work. It is entirely interior, entirely ongoing, and entirely necessary if the delivery is to land in a container capable of holding it. The specific quality of a lump sum versus accumulated income. They are not the same experience and they are not the same information about your life. Accumulated income is the confirmation that a system is working, that the declared mechanisms are producing the declared results, that effort is being converted to compensation at the expected rate, that the ordinary flow is flowing. It is good. It is reliable. It is not transformative in the specific, sudden, structural way of a lump sum. A lump sum is something different. It is evidence not that the system is working, but that the system was never the only thing operating, that underneath the declared mechanisms, something else has been at work, something that does not announce its activity and does not produce incremental visible results and does not respond to the usual forms of monitoring and optimization and conscious management. Something that has been moving in the background of your financial reality through channels you were not directly operating toward a delivery that the surface level accounting of your efforts would not have predicted. This is why lump sums are disorienting even when they are welcome. They reveal the existence of a current you did not know you were in. They suggest that the map you have been navigating by is incomplete, that there are roots on the territory that do not appear on the map, that there are forces operating on your financial reality that are not accounted for in the ordinary understanding of how things work. And this revelation is simultaneously wonderful and unsettling because it raises the question of what else the map is missing. What other currents are running beneath what you can see? What other deliveries are accumulating in channels you are not watching, arriving on schedules you cannot predict, produced by movements you did not consciously make? The lump sum is a window into the deep current. It says the deep current is real. It says you are in it. It says what you have been doing has been doing more than you knew it was doing, in more directions than you were monitoring, with more results than the visible accounting of your efforts would have suggested. The lump sum is the deep current surfacing, briefly, visibly, in a form you cannot mistake for something else. Where it comes from, not a single source, necessarily lump sums, have a way of appearing to come from one place, while actually being the convergence of several things that arrived simultaneously at the same point. A legal matter resolved. A business arrangement maturing. A return on something invested, not necessarily money, sometimes time, sometimes relationship, sometimes the specific compounding return on having shown up consistently in a direction that finally reached the point of material payoff. A recognition of value that was always present but not previously compensated. A windfall in the literal sense, something loosened from its previous position by a force that had nothing to do with you and that fell by the specific geometry of your position in your direction. Any of these, all of these, none of these, and something else entirely. The source matters less than the arrival. The source is interesting, is worth understanding, is relevant to the decisions you make about how to receive and deploy what arrives. But the source is not the meaning of it. The meaning is in the current, in the confirmation that the deep current is real, that you are in it, that your life has been moving in a direction that was always going to produce this, that the route you were on without knowing you were on it has arrived somewhere specific, and the somewhere is here in your hands, in the material form of a sum that changes the texture of what is available from this point forward. How to welcome. The title says welcome. Not receive, not accept, not manage, welcome. The distinction is worth inhabiting. Receiving is passive, it happens to you, you are the object of it, you stand in the path of what arrives, and it arrives. Accepting implies assessment, the granting of permission, the evaluation of whether the thing being offered meets the criteria for admission. Welcoming is different, it is active without being effortful. It is the opening of a door rather than the standing in a path or the granting of a conditional admission. It is the motion of a person who is expecting someone not with certainty about timing, not with knowledge of the exact form the arrival would take, but with the readiness of someone who had prepared the space, who had made room, who had kept the threshold clear. Keep the threshold clear. This is the practical instruction, and it is less abstract than it sounds. The threshold is the internal space where financial reality enters your life, the beliefs that either open or narrow the passage through which material change arrives. The threshold is clear when you are not blocking it with the specific, varied, unconsciously maintained debris of the old container, the limiting beliefs, the inherited stories about who gets financial abundance and who doesn't, the comfortable familiarity with a certain level of material reality that makes any significant departure from that level feel like a mistake waiting to correct itself. That debris accumulates without notice. It feels like realism. It feels like appropriate humility about one's own circumstances. It feels like the sensible management of expectations in a world that does not distribute its abundance evenly. And some of it is realistic, and some of it is appropriate, and some of it is sensible, but some of it is just debris accumulated from the wrong sources, applied to a current situation that is not the situation it was formed in response to. Clear the threshold of the debris. Leave the realism that is actually realistic about your current situation. Leave the humility that is actual humility rather than internalized scarcity. But move the debris that belongs to a different chapter, to the seasons when the limitation was real and the constraint was genuine and the self concept was appropriately sized to what was available. That chapter is closing or has closed. And the threshold needs to reflect the chapter that is opening rather than the one that is done. The lump sum will not solve everything. This is worth saying clearly and early rather than discovering it in the aftermath of arrival. A significant amount of money landing in your life will change your material circumstances in ways that matter and will not change the things that are not material in ways that can be confused with having been changed. The relationship that was difficult before the money will still be difficult after it and will now also have money in it, which adds complexity rather than removing it. The habit that was serving a function before the money will still be serving that function after and will now have more resources to serve it with, which amplifies rather than resolves. The questions about direction and purpose and what this life is actually for will still be there after the lump sum, more visible, if anything, because the material pressure that was occupying space in your attention will have diminished, and the questions will be the thing your attention lands on when it is no longer occupied by the immediate. This is not a warning against welcoming what is coming. It is the honest context for welcoming it, the understanding that what arrives is a resource, and resources are not solutions, they are capabilities. They expand what you can do. They do not determine what you will do or who you will be while doing it. They create options that were not previously available. What you do with the options, how you move through the expanded space, what you build in the larger container, which questions you turn toward when the material pressure releases and leaves the deeper questions visible, that is entirely, irreducibly yours. The lump sum is the opening of more of yours. What you do with the more is the thing that will matter most, looking back, from whatever distance eventually makes this period of your life legible as what it actually was. Virgo, the deep current is real and you are in it, and what is moving through it toward your specific position on the map is significant. Not in the abstract sense of a reading that wants to leave you feeling good about your prospects, but in the specific sense of energy that has been accumulating through the particular combination of who you are and what you have been doing and what the current moment in the larger movement of things has arranged in your direction. Something is rerouting toward you, has been rerouting for longer than this moment, through channels you were not watching, from sources you may not have anticipated, arriving in a form that the surface level accounting of your efforts,